Welcome to the Power of Design podcast, where we have inspiring conversations that explore the intersection of architecture, construction, and real estate, so we can understand the dynamics and trends that shape an exciting and powerful built environment. This is your host, Jack Osa. In today's episode of The Power of Design, we have a repeat guest. His name is Chris Moeller, the founder and principal of Orion Growth, a workplace consulting firm specialized in helping companies design and build productive and engaging workplaces. Chris and I wanted to get back together because our first episode was pre-COVID and had too much to talk about what has happened in the last year. This time, we talk about COVID impact in the workplace, leveraging technology to make our lives better, and what it's like to grow and evolve as an entrepreneur. This is my conversation with Chris. Hey Chris, welcome back to the Power of Design podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, Jack. Thanks. How are you?
Excellent. I mean, you should feel very very happy because you're the first repeat guest I had on my podcast.
Yeah, what a year it's been, right? I look back, we recorded December 2019 and we published episode 17 right there before the pandemic.
That's right.
March 9th.
We had no idea what was coming.
That Friday is when the music stopped.
That's right. Awesome. Well, I think what I like to do to start is why don't you just give us a quick intro to who you are and your company, so people who didn't listen to the first one have an idea of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So Orion Growth, we've been around 11 years, and we service sort of two primary roles. One is the planned environment, so we help projects, specification through management through delivery, and we've added a whole new virtual side to our business. So we're really now focusing on a hybrid tenancy.
Yeah. So what kind of clients do you work with?
So mostly portfolio clients that have, multiple locations and distributed workforce throughout the U.S.
Yeah. And it's mainly office, workplace projects?
Almost specifically office. Really this last year has sort of put a pause on our other sort of tendencies, because I think our focus and our calling really now is on workplace and specific to office. We're trying to solve that problem.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about COVID. So we met last year and we had a great podcast and it was awesome. And now a year later, tell me about, the impact in your business, everything that had happened. Have you guys reacted to it? What had that created for you personally and for your business?
Yes, there's a lot there for sure. So I would say first and foremost, 2020 gave us probably one of the coolest opportunities, sort of yin and yang. The good side is that it allowed us to really hit the pause button and study and observe and research and unpack and rewind and have conversations with people that before were maybe too busy and not very approachable or amicable to having a conversation around the academics of workplace.
Right.
So while we paused on our physical projects, that really, really gave us an opportunity to dive in to the academics of workplace.
Nice. So, you have more time now because now, we're not at the office. We're not doing all those things. And I think that's one of the key things we got back. One of the greatest gifts of COVID was time, because we used to complain about not having time. Now, all of a sudden, we have more time to be with our family. We're in front of the computer. We're at home more time. Now we can have all those conversations. And I think, having that attitude that we can use this time to learn, to go deeper into conversations we should be having long time ago. What we haven't, it's the best way to really make the best out of the situation.
No doubt. And the resources that sort of came to the top through reflection are two resources, time and money.
Sure.
Right? Because people were struggling. They had a lot of time, or they were okay financially, or they were not okay financially because they had too much time.
Yeah.
So one of the beauties of this last year is really the opportunity that it gave us to pause and listen.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to constantly go out and sell and make your point about what you believe is right in the world.
Yeah.
It gave us an opportunity to stop and question and really truly understand what workplace is and why it's important that we get it right.
So what kind of context or environment did you create or set up in order to have those conversations with your clients? And then tell me about those conversations.
Yeah, again, a really good question. So we converted the garage at the Moeller residence, right? Some years ago. We upgraded that. And during the pandemic, I was still allowed, still available for my employees to come in, which was great. It allowed us to hot desk, which is kind of, one of the hybrid solutions that's out there is co-shared space or space as a service. It really allowed us to sort of get our hands around the platform and the edge devices that we had and trying to make sure that our edge devices, our computers, our headphones, were all sort of the same version, because what was to ensue was different versions, updates, companies that we had been talking with that were using applications for shared screens that weren't working, or they didn't have the right information security allowances on them. It really, really allowed us to use our tools in our workshop in our office to test for our clients, because we were living it and doing it while they were doing it.
Sure. So once COVID hits and projects are on pause, but you still have communication with your clients, what kind of conversations did you guys have with them?
Well, I think first of all, everybody underestimated the beginning, right? March 13th or 12th or 14th or whatever day we want to mark it of 2020, when the music stopped, just a week after this first podcast went live. I think we thought the projects were going to be delayed a couple months.
Yeah.
And then I think we thought they would be delayed maybe to the next quarter. So that was March, right? So June, July. Then we realized that those projects really are, as we were consulting back to clients, it made no sense for that project to happen at that point.
Yeah.
So a little humility there, right? You learn how to consult the proper way.
Yeah.
Trying to advise clients into office space during a pandemic. Yeah. As a consulting firm that gets paid sometimes to make difficult decisions, probably not the best place. So
right.
So I would say that the delivery space, the delivery on the space was probably the biggest challenge, the biggest hurdle for 2020.
Sure.
But it started some great conversations. Total shift in design development.
Yeah. So tell me about that new version of your company now, having gone through that, breakthrough time of new thinking, new ideas, and how do you leverage and capitalize on that opportunity?
Yeah. So 2020, we launched a new offering called Total Tenancy. Mm-hmm. And Total Tenancy, the concept of Total Tenancy is along the lines of Maslow's hierarchy of need. The premise behind it is, and it's still in development, obviously. The premise behind it is that if you can effectively plan the workplace as a distributed workplace and truly get people into a solid solution on their platform that has less obstacles and has less issues with information security, and those folks have the ability to work from anywhere, securely, comfortably, effectively, efficiently, safely, then they can fit in any space.
Yeah.
So we've flipped the entire model from building spaces to building spaces.
Sure. Platforms.
Virtual spaces.
That's amazing. And, I don't know how much you can say about that, but what do you think are the main components of that platform?
Well, there's an image, and maybe we'll include it in the links here that we've been working on. That'll help clarify that. And we're working on the website. So there will be a link to Total Tenancy on the website.
Yeah.
But the premise behind it, the answer to the question that was being posed, and is still being posed, is how does the office support a distributed workforce?
Yes.
Or when they return to work, what does that hub look like?
Yep.
So it starts with the fact that we're still having conversations and we're not road mapping. We should be road mapping. That's my opinion. But it's not going to go back to normal. It is new. It's different. It's always been here. We've just given certain workers the ability to work from anywhere if they were above what they call above the knowledge line.
Yeah.
Right. If they were executive, or if they were director, or if they had the investment money to make their own IT investments and have access to solid, stable internet at home. It's just now, it's become a proven ground the last year that people can work remotely. They're cooped up. They need human interaction. This is like the first time that I've been out actually doing things.
Yeah.
Instead of doing this via Zoom. But the point is that I think the last year has proven that we can do it. Certain businesses in the service sector above the knowledge line can truly work independently. And those people should be free to do that as long as it's efficient, as long as it's safe.
Yeah. And I think, what, as you said, what's interesting is that we had those things before. And it was just a change in mindset, because now you have to do it. When we had the choice, we were like, okay, yeah, we know people could work from home, but I'm not sure if that's going to work because of, X or Y reasons, generational or insecurity. But now we realize that when we have to work from home and people start doing it, I might be nervous the first couple of months, but at some point now, like, oh, wow, things are working. People are creating things, making things happen. So this is real. And we had, GoToMeeting since the 90s.
Right.
And now Zoom and Google Meet, always available. We never used it.
Right.
We used it just sometimes. And now we realize, man, we can use it every single day with everyone.
And I think that's one of the interesting points, is that having worked all over the country and having this computer and having our platform and having all of these tools and using Zoom constantly for conference calls that were across the country. We had project calls in 36 cities. We've been using this. Orion and a lot of companies that have a mobile workforce, or folks who do travel, salespeople, executives that have, the million milers, so to speak. This is not new. It's just now approachable and it's affordable. The issues that we're starting to see now are fatigue.
Yeah.
People are working too hard, right? There's too much. Folks aren't making the most of their time on Zoom calls or GoToMeetings. There's not an agenda. And there's not tasks and milestones associated with a goal, right? Yeah. And we're seeing fatigue. So Microsoft just this week released their WTI, which is their Work Trend Index for 2021. It's 40 pages of gnarly stuff, data, and analytics in workplace. And it's pretty telling. The fatigue is real, and almost half of the global workforce is either planning to or looking to make a move from their current position. Yeah. So this is pretty disruptive.
Oh, sure. I think, like anything, it's all about getting used to things. And, we were used to going to the office 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day for 52 weeks for 40 years. And we all did it. And some people used to work from home, and that was the normal for them, was a small percentage. So even when people were at the office all the time, and one of the conversations here is customization. There's a lot of progress in workplace design where, the ideal workplace should be more flexible. If you have to do focused work, you have an office. If you want to go work at the, stand-up desk for one day because you're doing certain type of task, then it should be available to you. And I think I always go back to the basic setup of workplace is very geared toward making a machine out of humans, right? So you go here to this box.
The factory.
Stay there forever. And so I think if we stay like this, let's say COVID is a constant, And people who have fatigue becomes that you're normal, and that's it, man. That's all you have, and you have to become used to it. And even if you have fatigue, you need to produce and generate income, and you have to do it. Because when we used to go to the office, then what about the people who didn't really fit to be 8 hours a day in a desk?
That's right.
So they got used to it. They had to do it. And now we're going through a different phase where now a lot of people have to change the way they work. The interesting conversation right now is when you talk about going back, right? So it's a fact that it's not going to go back to normal 100% for sure.
Right.
So the question is, what's the degree of normalcy? And I think generationally you can see, organizations that are led by older generations, they want everybody back as soon as possible.
That's right.
There's a lot of people saying that. Some organizations are saying, we're going to go back, but we're going to give you, let's go back 3 or 4 days. Or they're giving people the option, which I think is going to be a huge differentiator, probably now and next year, to attract and retain talent.
Sure.
Because if you are 24 years old and you just joined the workforce and you went through this and you started working from home, and you're like, oh man, this is nice. And I can make things happen. When somebody's offering you a job and they're asking you to go there 40 hours a week, you're going to be like, what? What are you asking for?
It's going to seem, it already seems foolish to think that, here's the deal. If you have a blank slate and you can start a company over again, and someone hands you the first computer and says, what would your culture be and how would your platform be set up? Just if you think about that now versus a year ago, it might have been, okay, I have to take that computer to a place, right?
Yep.
Now it's turn on the computer and think, where do I store the information? How do I attract my clients?
Yeah.
Right? And seeing this concept of tenancy, digital tenancy, right? We've made some parallels this year that AWS, Amazon, seems to be like the industrial landlord.
Yep.
Google is a retail landlord. And Microsoft Azure is a Class A office space landlord.
Yeah.
So when you think of it in terms of tenancy like that, and you start to look at the trends of where the data is and where people are choosing to store their data, it's interesting. It's so, when you unpack that, e-commerce absolutely should live on Google's cloud because that's what they do. They put buyers and sellers together.
Right.
Office is 100% compliance based and has tertiary review processes and Securities and Exchange Commission compliance and IS. That's Office. That has to live in Azure. That's how they build. Yeah. Right? And Amazon Web Services, AWS, think about what Amazon does. I mean, they're the largest 3PL provider, third-party logistics provider in the world. Yeah. They're the industrial office landlord of the world. So where your data sits now is tenancy. You're a resident. It resides somewhere. Where does it reside? Yeah. And what's the purpose of that data? And who's looking at it? And how are they manipulating it to use, to help gain other tenants? When you come into a building, sometimes people want to know the tenant roster. Who's in the building? How many times on a tour you hear that? Because they want to be either associated with or disassociate from their competition in that building. So total tenancy is starting to pay attention to that even.
Oh, yeah. And what's exciting is that totally translates to education as well. Just watching my kids flip to virtual, in 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And embrace it, love it, a lot of things that they didn't use before in computers. My 9-year-old, she didn't have a computer. She had a tablet that she used it for YouTube and maybe playing some Roblox games. But now she has her own laptop and man, she can do stuff that I'm like, how did you do that? And she's like, oh yeah, you do it like that, like that.
Well, it's a different,
and it's 100% virtual, and they love it. Like for them, they're learning.
That's right.
And they're engaging with their friends online.
And it's time to teach. If you want, so one of the things that I have written down here is to rethink and unlearn, right? So is a library a media center or is a library a library?
Yeah.
if you want to learn how to or envision how to create a planned environment, a space that supports a virtual distributed workforce, look at your universities. Look at the way universities, and look at the way now 74% of our kids' public education is sitting on cloud, on the Chrome, on Chrome's browser.
Yeah.
So that many kids are using Google Classroom. That many kids are using those platforms. It's unprecedented.
That I was very surprised and amazed by how Google responded to that for education, because they set up that platform, Google Classroom, really fast, and it works very well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because of the simplicity, who's always been one of Google's, design aspects, is very simple.
It is. And it's great until you need the extensibility, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very, very good, solid platform for kids or for small businesses that are just getting started. It's when you need the feature that it doesn't have that makes you have to grab an app. And then the app has to require an integration. Then the integration has to require some RESTful API. So it gets very, very expensive to integrate into Google. So that's maybe a different conversation.
Sure, but the basics are covered.
They are,
and just the fact that anybody can use it, it's inexpensive. Anybody with any level of education, if you know how to click a mouse and open a computer, then you can totally use the Google platform.
I think it's important that we remember that they are the world's largest marketing company.
Oh, sure.
They sell products.
Yeah.
So, it's at the end of the day, sometimes that's the best place to be. If you're a retailer, you should be in retail space.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk about business. Tell me about your business in general, the impact on COVID of, what were your main concerns and what did you do in order to make things work? Because at some point, we need to keep sending invoices and make money and bill. And if all of a sudden what we do, nobody's buying, then what do you do and how do you make it work?
Yeah, no, that's right. So we applied for and received PPP this past year. So, not knowing how long we would be in lockdown, right? That was April-ish, mm-hmm. May-ish. And we have not had to let any full-time workers go. The contract work, obviously, around the country that was associated with project management and site surveys, that sort of thing had to stop because most of the projects that weren't under contract went on a hold that obviously went on indefinitely. We're lucky. We happen to be at the right time where we had enough invested in our clients and our relationships. Yeah. And we had enough time in our contract and our service level agreements to have conversations that were meaningful enough to make up for the larger projects. Yeah. So thankfully, having that third stream of revenue where we've got recurring monthly revenue on the cloud side. Sure. And a quick pivot to be able to have cloud architecture discussions with small businesses. Yeah. And making that parallel to Office in cloud. Yeah. And really creating a hybrid approach. We've built 85% more on the cloud. Yeah. Probably in 2020 than we did in the planned environment.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it totally makes sense, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
We see no difference now. We see, I think the future, we'll probably get to that, but I don't know if you saw that there was an NFT house that sold for $500,000, yeah. Right? And everybody's saying, how does an NFT house sell for $500,000? Yes. I can't believe it. Well, when you look at some of these models and you look at, real Unreal Engine and BIM modeling and construction, it's drawings versus models. Yep. Drawings are two-dimensional, they're flat, and they're in the real world, right? Models are three-dimensional, and they're there usually virtually. You can print them, you can build them. But which one gives you more information? Yep. The model does. Sure. So I think we're going to start to see, and I hope we're going to start to see this. I think it's finally here, Jack. I think we're going to start to see drawings turn into models.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that those models are going to be, BIM modeling in your case, and even the gamification of space. And we're going to see that NFT house that sold for $500,000. The value in that is that space digitally produced can give you the virtual version of it. So if you have a room that says, file storage, your file storage can be in there, and you can gamify that whole space for distributed workplace.
Sure. And when all the NFTs conversation started, I immediately started thinking about, art. Like,
well, did you see that one?
Yeah.
Beeple.
Yeah. When you see art, how much is this painting, right? Is it $1 million or $2 million? And that's where the value of something is whatever somebody's willing to pay for that.
That's right.
And I see a lot of that in the NFTs conversation, because a lot of people can say, okay, what is that? Like, I don't touch it. And it's like even Bitcoin, like, I don't touch it, I don't see it. But if somebody believes there is a value and they're willing to exchange it for some other things that have value, then now it has value.
That's right. You said, I think in one of your last recent podcasts, that in business, all profit comes from risk.
Yeah.
Right. That's where we are. There's a risky that we're at that point where we have to realize that the office isn't an office. It's a workplace. And that workplace is comprised of both on-prem, all right, in-house, so to speak, and distributed. And you can't ignore, in fact, if anything, maybe the heaviest part of the investment should be the distributed workforce first. Think of the workflows that need to be created, the forms, the frustration that's there because you and I are sharing files, but your logic in where that file belongs and my logic in where that file belongs are different. So the employer's responsibility is to think for you.
Yeah.
So that it's, okay, Jack, in your training, this is where the file is. So we both know, okay, that's where the file is. That's a decision that's not draconian.
Sure.
That's just where it needs to be. Like if you were to walk into a planned environment and see file cabinets in accounting.
Yeah.
Those are accounting files.
Right.
So how do you map that virtually, right? How do you put that logic in place that makes people understand that their destination file is always in the same place? They can get there multiple different ways.
Sure.
That's how they choose to get there.
Yeah.
But it's always in the same place.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really interesting.
We'll be right back with more from the Power of Design podcast.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
I always have this, and maybe we have this conversation with you, but I always talk about how, in concept technology, it's more, more robotic, machine, more away from being human. But what's interesting is that the more technology allows us to be even more human. Like, when you use social media, it's satisfying the basic need for connection.
Yes.
Looking at others, and we're jealous about what they're doing.
Yes.
And we're curious about somebody else's life. So even though it's technology, it's satisfying our crave for connection and for understanding and for curiosity. And I think in the workplace conversation, one of the things that we talk about a lot is, the work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
that I think it doesn't exist because you're the same human.
We just call it life now.
Right.
It's life.
It's life.
It's life.
So how do you leverage technology to just continue doing life? And even the very definition of work, what is work?
Yeah.
Is this thing that you do to do what? To like generate income or money to pay your bills? So what if there is another way where you can pay those bills, and then what will you do, right? And the value that you add to society as a person, how does society return that value that you're bringing? So, you live a nice, fulfilling life.
Yeah, there's so much there, Jack. So some of my research this past year has gotten me down deep, right? Sometimes when you want to know the future, you have to look to the past. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that metacognition was a thing. I didn't realize that... I think I had heard of corporate anthropologists, but I don't think I ever understood what corporate anthropology was. Mm-hmm. I definitely didn't know what the Dunning-Kruger effect was. That's one of my favorite. Thinking you're good at something when you're not good at something. Oh, man. It's and the more you argue it, the more it exposes that you don't know it. It's one of my favorite things to have seen in 2020 because, quite frankly, we didn't know anything.
Oh, sure.
Right? We had no data. Lockdown, no data. As far as we knew, it was a zombie apocalypse. Everybody's going to die up until about June. Then we realized mortality rates weren't quite as bad. Then we realized, so everything, and we started populating data, and we started looking at the global pandemic and looking at numbers from other countries, and we started realizing the impact wasn't as bad on schools for younger kids, right? So here we are. But when you talk about the future, I think it's important for us to realize that we have to put people back first. It's people first. It's a safe people first environment. Process will come. People will seek relationships. The idea of folks in the past meeting people in person for the first time. I mean, I've worked with some companies, some folks, some people on my teams for 3, 4, 5 years before I've met them. People seek personal relationships online first. Like 40 some odd % of people now that are getting married or in a significant long-term relationship say that they met online first. Sure. So this notion that you can't have a meaningful relationship that starts online is crazy.
Oh yeah.
I think that someone put it in some of my research maybe this week was that we're the Model T of technology for social media. Mm-hmm. And the experiences that we have because of where we are now from this year are only going to get that much better. Virtual reality, augmented reality, emerging social dating sites with professional dating sites. We're seeing that. Bumble has a professional, all of a sudden has a professional site, like a LinkedIn version of Bumble. Yeah. Because LinkedIn's too corporate for some young folks. Sure. So I think we're going to start to see social media and we're going to start to see these platforms merge because they're going to see value in, if you're seeking a personal relationship, why can you not be seeking a business relationship? Why can't you be people first and say, hey, Jack, I like you. And that's why we're going to do business. Yeah. If I seek an architect, it's probably because I know the person behind the work.
Sure. I think like any social relationship, you always have different kinds of people, right? So there are people who they show you who they are. There's some people who have another agenda. There's some people who are just lying. There's all kinds of people. Well, yeah. And I think, once you put that online, we're a little bit more apprehensive because you don't know what they're really saying. And I think that's when you really need to use the platform to communicate authenticity and truth. And part of that is being consistent and open, and that's where people start realizing who you really are.
There's a guy out there by the name of Harry Frankfurt. Harry's a philosopher and author, and he's got a YouTube video, and we will definitely put it here somewhere. Mm-hmm. He's the author of On Bullshit, is what he calls it. Yeah, it's the difference between a lie and bullshit. Yeah. And it's amazing, just going down that whole path of authenticity, right? We're really good. Humans are really good at sniffing out authenticity. And that's not lost on the virtual. It's not lost at all.
No.
So you can
there.
sort of just tell. And Harry's got a great little 5-minute YouTube video called On Bullshit that I think everybody should see.
Yeah. I hear a lot of people, and some people ask me about like, hey man, like what should I do on Instagram or what should I do on LinkedIn? And I always explain, just take the digital aspect out of that. It's still social. Like, what do you do when you meet somebody? You're nice, you're respectful. And if you want to eventually get business, what do you want to do? Go sell and sell and sell? No, you try to develop a relationship. You try to add value. It's the same thing. Just do the same thing online. If you want to promote your product or service, don't be salesy. Try to help others.
That's right.
Understand what they want. Build that relationship. I've been very happy in the last 6 months with the podcast, especially because I've been really putting a lot of emphasis on my social media presence and the podcast, and I see how a lot of people have been reaching out to be on the podcast or to just have a connection, and everything is happening online, mainly LinkedIn or Instagram.
Yes.
And yeah, some of those, they just want to sell something or they just want some airtime on the podcast and they have no idea what the podcast is about.
Right.
But there is another good percentage that is really authentic people who I'm very interested in about who they are, what they're doing. I really admire, what they bring to the table. And there is a huge synergy and connection in there that we're both benefiting from it.
You bet.
And I will never have those connections if it wasn't because of the digital platform that I'm using to communicate what I'm about.
That's right. And that's to bring it back to anthropology, corporate anthropology. That's exactly what that is. That's the sense of community. There's a company that you may or may not be familiar with called GitLab. They're 100%. They're a global company that's 100% distributed. They have no offices, and their work week. Everybody says how culture. You can't have culture if you have a distributed workforce, or that's the biggest challenge. The way that they've answered that is, first of all, they're global. So they've put together Slack, sort of chats, and I don't even know if it's Slack, but it's basically a message board place where they can go Slack. and this is GitLab, so I think they probably have their own because it's anyway. But the point is that Fridays are their day. It's their day to go out to the community. And bring the stories back. So they give people Fridays off, but the expectation is that they come back and tell their stories, that they go out for service on Fridays. And service can be anything. It can be a random act of kindness. It can be building a habitat house. It can be, it's a day of service. Yeah. Maybe it's reading to your kid's class or whatever, right? And they don't make you, they don't print a T-shirt that says GitLab and put a team together out at a place with a sponsored event with cameras so that they can post it on social media. They really mean go do you. Yeah. But they do require that you come back and share it. And I think that's something there's brilliance in simplicity. That creates culture. You find out things like, your American dream story, right? We know that because we've shared it. And it's out there. So there should always be a story of how you give back communally to create your culture in your distributed workforce. And that it can be just as simple as giving people the time to think about sharing the story. Sure. It's not just a bump-in conversation at the water cooler about something maybe completely unrelated. It's a purposeful sharing story about what you did communally. Yeah. I think that's important.
Oh, yeah, it is. So in that topic, why don't you tell me more about your own story? You as a father, professional person, human. How do you keep growing, learning? What are the things that you're interested about? The habits, things that that fits who you are and help you go to the next level. Because I have known you for a while, and part of why I enjoy our conversations is that every time I talk to you, you're at a different level.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think it's because, I think that there's this thing called mental fitness. And I think that as I get older, the more I realize I don't know. It's not more that I do know, it's more that I don't know. And that makes me, that gives me energy to go seek the information and distill the information to see if it's from the perspective of marketing or if it's really raw data or if it's really analytical reference. I spend a really, really good part of my day researching academically because of mental fitness. And I think that's what gets me to that next level. You get a couple of quotes that come across with that, right? Mark Twain's got a great one: continuous improvement's better than delayed perfection.
Oh yeah. That's
right.
nice.
And if you're constantly trying to question your ideals, then you can't get stuck being, well, like Harry Frankfurt says, full of bullshit. You can't get there because you question your own conviction.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it, is that endless, insatiable curiosity that is inside of me to just keep understanding more.
Yeah.
This COVID period, this last year, it's almost felt like a calling. How can we solve workplace? Like, what's wrong with the office? And when people started having this conversation, I was jumping for joy.
Yeah.
Because for 11 years, I've been trying to help solve this problem.
Yeah.
And finally, as terrible as it is, I mean, it's a pandemic that's caused, as a result of that, we're having meaningful conversations around workplace.
Yeah.
And people are truly, genuinely concerned and interested in having nerdy conversations about these things.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic time.
Yeah, that's really good. What would you say is one thing that it's in your mind around a lot about yourself that you like to fix, improve, or take to the next level?
I probably need to get better at figuring out my value, monetizing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing that because I'm so passionate about this, about workplace and about sharing stories and research, I sort of overlook the fact that there's an opportunity to monetize this.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's probably a shortcoming. I'm a pretty cerebral person.
Yeah.
And I always look, my perspective is always the user's perspective. And I hate the word user, but it's from the seat. It's the person.
Yeah.
When I design a space or I envision a space, I envision it from the minute we get off the interstate to the parking experience, to the lobby, to the elevator, to the door, because whatever is inside of that space, it's going to be spot on. So user experience for me is everything.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is, typically our strength at some point becomes our weakness. And when you have a mind that is very sharp, that you can dissect everything, your mind is like a knife. It's a really sharp knife, and you can cut through everything, and you take any problem and you dissect it and you do anything. The problem is that you use that tool for everything. And you cannot use a knife to do everything. Sometimes you need a spoon.
That's right.
Sometimes you need a fork. And since we're good with the knife, we want to use the knife to solve any aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
So we start creating a lot of damage. We cut people. We cut ourselves because we don't know when to put that knife down.
Yeah, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
That's right.
And you're right. And I think that the beauty of that is what I've figured out, here over the last few years, is that that's what partners are for. You can't be an expert in everything. You just can't. But you can hire the best. I think what we're going to see now that companies are road mapping, and now that office is called workplace, and now that we have remote strategies, and people are paying attention to information security, which is a whole different conversation, which if you're not paying attention to information security, you sincerely need to be paying attention to information security. But what I think is happening is that companies are becoming more agile just in their own thinking, right? So how can we help them in the planned environment? How can you, as an architect and designer and creative, start to pull together that side of their mind? Do you have a set of questions that you can start with when you're doing programming pre-DD that asks, do you have a virtual platform? Are you set up to work from anywhere but here? Right? When does that happen? Do designers and architects and engineers start to have those questions about why are you here? Are you ready to be here?
No, never.
Right?
Never. And that's the problem, that we're trapped within our own silo of thinking.
Right. I want a space.
Yeah, I want a
Hammer, nail.
space. Let's solve it in the
Hammer, nail.
space realm because that's where I work. But the best thing is, let me understand your business model. How do you make money? That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, then, how does your workforce support that process? And then what do they need to facilitate that? What environment? And then my work is to facilitate that environment and help you create it, whether it's digital or physical.
Well, and think about envision the device agnostic space, the hub that supports the distributed workforce where people can come to work and be efficient. One of the things that we talk about is the model of design inside of the virtual platform. It's equally as important, if not maybe even more important, because virtual fatigue comes on from switching from application to application, or authenticating another username, another password, or jumping from one file that's in one Dropbox location to something that's on your desktop, right? Efficient design, effective design it takes into account life safety and flow, aisle space, ingress, egress, right? So that you don't have to walk into a space and there be a door that's locked that you have to open, and then you open up to another door that's locked and you have to open. But our virtual space is very much like that.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of ingress and egress and flow. And that's so important in the planned space. How a space makes you feel. There's a whole design challenge to the virtual workplace associated with ingress and egress.
Yeah. Tell me, what's the best version of yourself in 5 to 10 years? How do you see yourself?
Well, last time I was here, I told you that I wanted to retire a pumpkin farmer.
Yeah.
I think
that changed?
I think I still want to retire pumpkin farmer. But I am happy to report back that while we were stuck in lockdown, March, April, and May of last year, we did go to the farm. We moved 100 miles out of town. And I spent 90 of the most impactful days that I probably will ever remember ever. We were virtually disconnected. We had a satellite connection, very slow internet connection. And I planted my first pumpkin farm.
Nice.
Yeah, I didn't do so well. And I realized I have a lot to learn.
Yeah, step one.
But the lessons that I learned from being connected to nature for 90 days during that, the systemic thinking about how a tree grows from the bottom up, very similar to how a company grows, the different ecosystems that are inside that are delicate that support that. So long answer to a short question. I think the best me is someone that stays connected to quiet, and someone that can find that quiet again. It's been a noisy year.
Yeah.
Right? Kids have been home all year. And they've faced their own challenges. The family, I went from traveling 2 or 3 days a week nationally to home a lot. And I'm also happy to report that we all still love each other.
Good.
A year later.
You made it.
We made it so far. But I think being grounded and being connected and making sure that there's always that interrelationship with the environment, really important for me. ESG, like that's starting to resonate with me. And ESG and finance even, finding clean ways to fund projects, not just build, but fund them from clean money.
Yeah.
Build with cleaner products, build with cleaner materials that are more sustainable, that are more local, that have a better story. Karani, there's a great architecture firm called Karani that's out there, started in Fayetteville, Georgia. They are doing social projects, so planned environment that needs to be built that has no funding. So they're sort of crowdsourcing meets architectural. Really cool idea, right? So you can go and your ESG side can fund a project that might help inner city kids have better access to media, or there's all kinds of projects that you can look at there. But I think that ESG side is no joke. I think that it's time for us as a community and as a people, as a group, as a country, to realize that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And that we have to look out for each other.
Nice. Okay. Right. Chris, thanks so much, man.
Yeah, Jack.
Second round, it was a success. So
well,
far.
thank you a bunch for having me be your first repeat victim.
Sure, man. I'm excited about that, and it's my podcast, so I can do whatever I want. So we can do a third one and a fourth one.
Well, let's just call this one "What a Difference a Year Makes."
Let's do it.
All right, we'll put those links in there for sure, because I think that there's some important information in there, and if nothing else, you can get a chuckle out of the idea behind bullshit.
Sure. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Jack.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Find out more about Jack and Osa Studio at osastudio.com and follow us on Instagram at the Power of Design podcast. Thank you.